usually says something like CSS is awesome. When I was putting these slides together, my wife came and went, "You've done that wrong." I was like, "You just don't get it." And she's like, "You don't get it." Anyway, this is me. Great photo. When I was fishing with beer, my favourite place. I have my drink here as well now. So I'm a staff engineer at Sainsbury's. Previously worked at IBM, Reuters, and for Dylan at SitePen. I've worked on some open source projects like Dojo, the widgets library, did a little bit for React Native CarPlay. And outside of that, I like fishing, as you can see. I drum in a band because that's what we all do right when we have time. And I like barbecuing. There you go, Oxford barbecuing. So this talk came about because I was doing an introduction to CSS and JavaScript to some of the graduates, some of which are here today at Sainsbury's. And I gave a little talk about like border radius, and border radius is a bad example. I was telling them about tools they might want to use, and one of the tools was Can I Use, right? We're all familiar with Can I Use? And I was like, so I kind of said, here's Can I Use, it's a great website for checking if the things you want to use can be used. And I could not find an example of something like that can't be bloody used now, like everything can be used. And I was like, well, hang on, what didn't used to be used? And it's border radius. I remember being on projects where they say, right, can you make this thing round? And you'd be like, ooh, do you need IE7? And they couldn't understand, like, again, no offense to anyone here that was in that chat, but I was like, why don't you know about Internet Explorer, like what we had there? And the idea of me came to kind of bring this talk together and just talk about what happened. So I'm going to go into a little history route here now. So in the beginning, there was HTML. I'm not going to get gospel-y, but I'm just going to do a bit of history here. So little timeline for those of us that don't know here. So 1990, Tim Berners-Lee, in Tim Berners-Lee we trust, proposed the mesh idea, and the idea is to share documents with links between them. He wanted to be able to share research papers, link between them, share those out to people. And in 1991, this became HTML1 with 18 tags. Okay, so I think we have thousands now. There's a game you can play in. It was in the JS email that came out the other week about can you name them all? And obviously you can't. 1992, Mark Andreessen, I'm going to call him Mark from now on, in case I get his surname wrong, who worked for the NTSA, started work on Mosaic. Okay, and he's going to be one of our characters for the next piece here. 1993, in comes Mark, and he proposes the image tag. So I don't know if anyone knows about this history here, but this is a fascinating kind of history of HTML on the web right here. It's the www talk mail list. You can look at all this. There's a QR code there if you want to have a look. It's on the Internet Archives. God bless the Internet Archives. And he waded in and he said, look, I want to propose a new image tag. He wants the web to work. He's working on his Mosaic browser. And this is all real. I haven't made this up. This is real. I want to propose a new tag. Image. The required argument is source. I think we're all familiar with this now, right? We have image source. The name's a bitmap or a pixmap, whatever they are. Not that we use them anymore. Blah, 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 blah. Here's my example. Foo, bar, blah. Right? Standard. Here comes Tim Berners-Lee. He dives in about 25 minutes later. Well, I'd imagined it'd be different. I thought we'd have an A and have a relative embed kind of thing in there and blah, 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 blah. Embed, present. This is what I want. Okay? So this is Tim Berners-Lee. He invented the damn thing, right? So what's Mark's response? He started off really nicely. He was there. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the first example of I got there first. So this is Mark's response. We're not prepared to support include embed at this point. It raises a number of nasty issues. So we're probably going to go with my idea. Right? And this is why we have image tag. Because Mosaic shipped a month after this. And it had image. And that was that. And that is kind of how things started. And we have this again with Internet Explorer did it lots, and we'll see some more of that in a minute. All the browsers did it, and that's kind of how standards evolved. But this is where it started. You can read all of this stuff. There was even some really cool stuff that happened here, and this was 30 years ago, let's remember, 30 years ago. There's a really cool chat in here, if you read through it, where they're discussing how we could present TGZ files, or tar files, on the web, and if there should be a .z file format we could access. So, that didn't happen, but obviously we do gzip things now, so that's good. So a little more timeline here. We're going to make this a bit more. We're going to come back to Mark in a moment. 1993, the Mosaic browser is released. February 1994, the first question I could find regarding style came up. Okay, so another thing just to say on that last one, if you look at the w3.com history of the HTML page, they do have a quote in there, and it's quite nice, and I will read this word for word verbatim because I have it in front of me. It's about Mosaic. Mosaic extended the features specified originally by Tim Berners-Lee. For example, it added images, nested lists, and fill-out forms. Academics and software engineers would later argue that many of these extensions were very, very much ad hoc and not properly designed. Does this sound familiar to anyone in here as well? So let's go through. This is the first question. It's from a guy called Paul. Whilst automatically generating some indented menus up to 4 deep, I created the following code, right? And here's this example. This is, again, this is 1994. It's a long time ago. We haven't got screenshots. And if you notice, the top one here, GB, doesn't have a space. The bottom one has a space. So he's complaining that Mosaic displays things differently to the Lynx browser. Okay? I mean, this is a problem we know now, right? We have this problem. And as we said, devices, there's so many of them. We never know where we're going to test it. And of course, Mark came back because he's got Mosaic now. He's first to market. And he's really understanding. It's not a bug. It's a rendering choice made by the browser. As we kneel before the altar of the ha, you can't control what your documents look like philosophy, you, dear sinner, nay blasphemer, can take solace in the fact that Mosaic is putting a blank line at the start of your list. Why? Because we thought it looked nice. What can you do about it? Probably nothing. Isn't that cheery news? And it goes down to, and if you want your document to look different, blah, 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 you can't. You're screwed. Live and learn or not. This is Mark Andreessen, right? This is his actual response. 25 minutes after the initial post to put up that request. 25 minutes is all it took for him to put this together. And again, if you read through this thread, there's some really interesting responses saying, wow, that's like the most honest response I've ever heard. But it was mean. Like, really mean. And he started off as such a nice guy, proposing his idea, right? So this guy comes back, Tony Sanders. Why don't you just implement one of the many style sheets proposals? This would be good. Mark again. Mark's viewpoint. Style sheets are an artificial construct inflicted on us because of the whole non-presentation philosophy. Blah, 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 blah. Actually, no, hang on. Publishers can still use this out of the box. If they don't, all they want is documents to look the way they want them to do. We won't inflict it on them. And at the top, very, very commonly placed kind of wording here. Then I get to tell people, well, now you get to learn this language to write your document, this language to style it. Oh, they'll love that. I mean, again, this again is how these arguments went, and this is how things happened. And shortly after, more stuff happened. 1996, the CSS1 spec was released. At this time, the browser was Internet Explorer 3. 1998, CSS2 was released. So we've got IE4 and Netscape 4 at this point. 2011, CSS 2.1 released. CSS3, well, it never actually got released, did it? We're still in draft spec. It never got past that. Mainly because everything's kind of modular now, and we have like browsers, again, kind of do their own thing. So once again, we've kind of gone round in circles, haven't we? It's now led by the browsers again. So styles cometh. This is my next section. Before HTML 3.2 release in 1997, we had some interesting ways of adding style. For example, we had some tags, which were added by particular browsers. So 1994, Netscape added Blink. We all know and love Blink. 1995, IE2 added Marquee. I mean, it made you feel like a rock star, didn't it, moving text across the screen on your GeoCities homepage? We all love that. And Center. Center's one of my favorite ones because actually the Google website used it to center the Google text on their page up until 5 years ago. It was on there, and it was deprecated 20 years ago. So as I said, 1997, HTML2 adds style. This happens. I don't know about you, but I made a website in Microsoft Publisher, exported it to the web. That's what I did. Uploaded it to some FTP somewhere, The Dancing Baby from 1996. This is a current website. dpgraph.com, this is it. It's a real website. I mean, we all remember counters. I bet everyone here had a flame GIF on their page at some point. We all did. And that's what it was. I mean, so the web had style, but did it really? What did it look like? So I asked ChatGPT, can you write me some code from 1997? It did it. It's great. So we have lots of styles in here, don't we? So we can see by looking at the code that we have styles in. We can see what things do, and we can see what's there. But it's not very clean, is it? It's quite busy. It's quite full, right? It's not very clear what's going on. 1997, HTML4 added the class attribute. So the other one was styles were like January 1997, and like by December they've gone, yeah, we've messed this up, haven't we? Let's tidy that up. Let's add classes. So now the code gets tidied up, and now we have classes. This is what we all know and love, right? So we have our classes here. I think the style sheets had to be at the top, but basically your style sheet was here. You had some vanilla CSS. Everything was lovely, and it went well, right? Going back to what Mark said, teaching engineers multiple languages gives us this great separation, but also gives us this. Like, we have people that don't know what they're doing. We have arguments between who does what. We have separation of concerns. Good and bad things happened. So what happened after that? So we have things like CSS resets. So we're all familiar with CSS reset classes that came in because suddenly browsers were doing different things. We had to level that playing field. We then had some CSS frameworks such as Blueprint, 960 Grid, because obviously every page is 960 pixels, and we had grids. And then we looked at server-side PHP processing. That was a thing, apparently. And again, that turned out great. We still use that today, surely, because this is... we can't have CSS in PHP now, can we? Can we really? We really can't. So now we're entering what I call the reign of the preprocessors. 2006, we had Sass. I didn't realize it stood for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets. I mean, that's a great name, right? Really great name. And Sass was written in Ruby. So you had to install Ruby. You had to install a gem file. You had to have that all set up. Hands up who used Sass? Ah, great stuff. Got some memories here then. Taking down memory lane. Indentation based. No commas. No semicolons. No brackets. Lovely. Or not. Had variables. It had mixins. It had nested rules. All of which are like very commonplace now. Like, we'll see that in a minute. I shouldn't have spoiled the kicker. But anyway, there you go. And then I think 2011 or 2010, SCSS came in because they realized that no one really liked the indented style sheets kind of approach, and they brought in SCSS, which stood for Sassy CSS, which is great. 2009, Less came in, Leaner style sheets, good one. This is what I became familiar with. I didn't really use Sass. Written in JavaScript, which is great. So it's one of the first ones where you had a plugin in the browser. So you could load your Less CSS files, it would process them on the browser. It very quickly had hot reloading, which was a really cool thing, which other browsers didn't have and other kind of frameworks wouldn't give you. And you could update it all there. We used it in Dojo Toolkit. We had it there. It was great. We could use it for theming. We could swap and change themes. And it had all the same things, including nested rules, something which no one really uses anymore, but it was great. And one of the great things, and especially with component libraries, is you could wrap each of your components with like an outer div and then nest all your components underneath. And that gave you that. So that solved that problem, solved your leaking components issue. And then we have the realm of, why does everything look the same? And this was literally everyone in 2011. Bootstrap. Bootstrap came along, and I appreciate before Bootstrap, we had Dojo, we had jQuery UI, we had UUI, we had, I think, MooTools UI was there. And Bootstrap was great, it came along, it was simple to use. I think everybody here's website looked like Bootstrap in 2011, right? Yeah? Everyone done that? Clean, grid system, component-based. But it didn't last long. Well, it did. It's still around. But it's one of those things. It's great, but I think it had its day. I mean, it was fantastic to use at the time. It was inspirational, and that was kind of interesting to see how we've now gone from these styling libraries to make CSS easier, or separate CSS, or change CSS, or encode CSS somewhere else, to let's give you a component library, and now you've got pre-formed, opinionated components that are styled or themed how you want them. Pre-processing died. It went, it disappeared. We post-process now. That's the new one. So we no longer pre-process. So we have things like auto-fixer, auto-prefix, so we have post-CSS, we have CSS modules, we have these lovely things. So post-CSS is here. I guess Babel was doing it for JavaScript, right? So you could Babel things, or Babel if you're that way inclined, you could do that. You could write kind of the next the next ECMAScript format, and it would down emit it for you. So post-CSS kind of did that for JavaScript. You could use the next level CSS3 things. You could use write your code without writing browser prefixes. Anyone know what browser prefix is? Yeah? So before browsers, for anyone that doesn't know, before, say, like if Mozilla implemented a feature before someone else, they'd be like -- Mozilla before border radius or something. And then you had to do -- IE or -- edge, and infuriating. But things like auto prefix to fix that for us. So this gave us minifying, it gave us modular CSS, it gave us linting, gave us some really cool stuff. We have CSS modules as well. That came along. I love CSS modules, it's great. Class name obfuscation, type CSS files, via TypeScript. Webpack and Babel bundling kind of allowed more separation going on there, and it would build them for you, bundle them with your components, import them, obfuscate them. No more BEM. Hands up who likes BEM? Ooh, okay. Fine. You're entitled, that's good. I find the problem with BEM is it's hard to learn, right? Hard to remember. You have like 5 or 6 class names all there. And one of the wonderful things about CSS modules is you can get it to build like BEM, which is great. So your output would be a BEM style file format. So it'd be like file, component, module, line, thing, modifier, whatever it is. And you can code it to there. But you can get that result, but you don't have to code it that way. You can have, every component can have a root class. Every component can have a title class. And there's some great stuff going on there. And then we come to this. So Jeff Atwood famously, infamously said, any application that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. And I'm not biased about CSS in JavaScript. I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to leave it alone. But style components came along. So it places the styles with the structure, and that's kind of one of the big things that people liked about it. You no longer have these separate CSS files you have to maintain, and you can create these portable, reusable components with the style baked in, right? Stops leaking styles. You can have dynamic styles with the props, which I think gets confusing sometimes, but you can do it. It's great. The problem I had with it, I'm going to make a few little opinions because I'll do that, is this is what I think you end up with sometimes, in my experience anyway. Because when you're coding everything as your styled components, say you've got a styled div, you've got a styled button, you've got a styled list, whatever, I think people have a tendency to make everything a div sometimes. Yeah? People have seen this, people have loved this, this happens. And I think that when you get like that, you get this incomprehensible DOM where you don't, this is meant to be a button, supposedly, but it's a div. And I think, not everyone, just a little example. We then had JSS. Anyone use JSS, JavaScript style sheets? So at least it looks, there you go, Dylan's there. So at least it looks like style sheets. You've got your CSS there. But like, if it looks the same, why are we doing it? Like, uses classes, so you export your classes, you put them in the page there. Get scoping by default, which is again a really good thing. And it gives you, as a user, the ability to put things together quickly, have it all in one place. And I guess it solves those problems if that's what you're looking for. And then we have this section. People might know what this one's about. Feel the wind in your hair. Tailwind. So Tailwind comes along. Opinionated class names. Again, we're solving this problem of how do we get consistency? How do we get a situation where one developer can write some code, another developer can write some code, the padding will be the same, the margins will be the same. How do we do that? How do we theme it? How do we make it work for our organization? And Tailwind gives us that. So Tailwind gives us all these class names, lovely human readable class names. So that H1, text 4XL, so 4 times size, font bold, text blue. It's great, right? And it's really cool. You don't necessarily need class names or something people like about it because you don't have to name things. Like you don't have to say, well, this is called an aside, or this is a side, whatever it's going to be. I can't think of names right now. Gives you responsive design out the box, so you can get small sections, large sections, medium sections, all of these cool things. And that's what your DOM looks like. It's great because you can read it. Doesn't this look a bit like styles? Inline styles. So are we really in a better place now? If this is the pinnacle of development now, obviously the developer experience is great, I'm not going to deny that. Are we in a better place now than we were in 1997? For that thing, right? So, we've broken one of the first rules now that I was taught about CSS, which is don't name a class name on what it does or where the DOM node is placed. You don't create a box and call it red box and put it on the left-hand side and call it left red box. Because if you move it to the right and make it blue, it's no longer a left red box. And that's kind of the idea of class names. It should define the thing and not what it does. So, I'm fine with it. It is there, but is that a great experience to kind of read the DOM? Is that going to be maintainable if you change it? And then there's this. What if an engineer has skipped some of, like the JavaScript fundamentals, the CSS fundamentals? I don't know if you can read the bottom bit there. It says, if you're nothing without Tailwind, then you shouldn't use it. So yeah, I think we get this sometimes, So you may get an engineer that's come along and they've just jumped into Tailwind, they're throwing things in, but they may not understand that things cascade or how things work and what's going on. And this question, should they understand more of what's going on? Should they know a bit more behind it? Should everyone know a bit more? So what's the answer? What should we be doing? And there's no great revelation here. It's a little bit of everything, really. Like, we should learn from everything that's been going on before and look at all the tools we have available. We've basically gone full circle. We've gone all this way down to changing CSS. Let's change it to InJS. Let's change it to PHP. Let's change it to Less. Let's do Sass. Let's do all these different things. But now CSS has caught up. We don't need to have a package to give us CSS variables in more because we have it and they cascade in the DOM as they should, which is a wonderful thing. It's wonderful. We have variables. We have opinionated component libraries out of the box that we can use now. And another thing on that, so we have an opinionated component library, and that's the thing to think about here, because way back when at the beginning of this talk, if you can remember that far back, we talked about the center element and the blink element and the marquee element, and these were basically opinionated components. Okay, so at that point we have opinionated components, we have styles that go into them, and we're kind of back in a situation where you're getting something out of the box and you're displaying it on your page, it's fit for purpose, it does its thing, and you can't really style it. Much like in 1993 when Mark Andreessen turned around and said, you can't style that list, we styled it for you. So again, we've kind of gone full circle here. But what would I do? So what I do in my current job now, or some of the engineers I work with do at the moment, is we look at using design tokens. So we use Figma. So we design things in Figma, and we use Tailwind. And one of the wonderful things about this is you can create a set of design tokens. So you throw your design tokens together, you define things like spacing, colors, brand colors, paddings, font sizes, all of these things, and you can import that into Figma, and you can import that into your component library. So now you have a situation where your single source of truth is a config, and you can say, right, I want all my padding, this isn't my real config, all my padding to be, like all my spacing to be 6 times spacing to be 24 pixels. So now if you change that there, your Figmas will update, your component library will update, and now what can happen is anyone can then pull in this config, and then they can use your Tailwind library in their component library, so your internal component library, wherever, or in their applications. And they're now getting your overridden customized Tailwind config, which will have your company branding and guidelines in it, your spacing, your branding colors, all of the things. This is kind of what we're doing. And you end up in this situation where you have CSS modules, which I love. I love CSS modules. You pull them in, you use them, the title's there. They're great when they use with typed CSS modules, so they are TypeScript safe, if you like TypeScript. And I know people are on the fence about apply, and I know they don't really suggest it anymore. However, the Tailwind config does. So if we use it there, one of the nice things I think you have here is you have a situation where you're keeping it tucked away. You get your ID auto-completion, you get all these things through. You still have the separation of concerns between your styles and your code. And for all intents and purposes, you're using Tailwind. And what you don't realize under the covers is it's using your own company's brand line guidelines. It's using your own spacing, your own font sizes, and all of those things. And again, we're now curating opinionated display library which has both structure and style in it, which you can't really change, which again feels a bit like 1993 again. But in truth, we have gone full circle. So I think, all of these things together we need to work on providing great developer experience for our teams. And I think that's the main thing to take from this, that people have worked through all these years to make developer experience better. A lot of that's been involved with obviously improving the libraries and the offerings we have there and the languages. We've got to a point now where we have them. But I think, we need to use build tools to optimize. We need to use things that support our browsers. We have to understand our users. I mean, great talk earlier about Africa. Like, you can't ship loads of things to Africa. You have to dumb things down, make them smaller, and take the data size out. You have to make it smaller. So we have to think about all these things. Another great thing to use, and I am nearly done, is container queries, like things like opinionated sizes. You should be able to put something on a DOM node. It should know how big a space it has, and it should resize to fill that space. And I think all of these things together give us a lovely experience we have now. And I think most of all, we should be thankful for the work that all the early browsers and the www talk mailing list kind of did for web development and the advancement of HTML, even though we are now right back where we started. And that's it. Thank you.